Welcome back, gamers. Today we're diving into Enotria: The Last Song, which is a fresh new take on the Souls-like genre. Now, if you've played anything inspired by From Software games, then you probably think you know what to expect. Grueling difficulty, tight combat mechanics, and rich lore hidden beneath the surface. And to an extent, you'd be right, but Enotria sets itself apart in several ways, and I'm here to break down what makes it special, where it stumbles, and where it's worth your time. So if you're ready, let's get into it. The very first thing that hits you when you boot up Enotria is its settings. Unlike the grimdark, gothic, or high fantasy worlds we're used to seeing in Souls-like, instead Enotria is bursted with vibrant sun-drenched colors, as it draws heavy inspiration from the Mediterranean landscapes, specifically Italian countryside, which instantly makes this game feel like a breath of fresh air, as you can almost feel the warm sun on your shoulders, and the game's environments pop with lively colors and artistic detail. And sure, this game has its darker moments, especially when you venture into the shadowy caverns or dilapidated ruins. But even then, Enotria isn't afraid to play with light and vibrant tones. This is a game that stands out visually, and in many ways it succeeds. But the setting isn't just a pretty background, it's woven into every fabric of the game's story. In Enotria you find yourself in a world controlled by evil playwrights, and this theme runs deep. Shakespeare's famous line, "All the world's stage," feels like a guiding principle here. The world is a kind of theatrical prison, where characters are trapped in external roles, doomed to repeat their lines until you, the player, set them free. It's a very interesting narrative choice that ties beautifully into the game's overall aesthetic. NPCs rehearse their lines on makeshift stages, bosses have a theatrical flair, and even you the character is nothing without a costume and mask. This theatrical spin on storytelling is one of the game's strongest aspects, setting it apart from the other Souls-like. It draws heavily from the Italian folklore, commedia dell'arte, and opera, creating a deeply unique atmosphere. However, it is also true that the story, like many Souls-likes, can feel a bit opaque at times. There's a lot of lore and detail here, but it's not always clearly presented. Still, for fans of the genre who enjoy piecing together a game's narrative through environmental storytelling and item descriptions, there's a lot to enjoy here. Alright, let's talk about the meat and potatoes of any Souls-like game, the gameplay. On the surface, Enotria has all the staples you expect from the genre: stamina management, healing flasks, light and heavy attacks, and of course bonfire-style checkpoints. But where it really tries to innovate is in its combat system, and this is where things get both interesting and problematic. At the core, the game's combat and parries, unlike other games that reward perfect parry with immediate stagger or counterattacks, Enotria instead does things a little different. When you parry, you don't immediately stagger your enemy. Instead, your parries fill up a meter that allows you to use special abilities called lines, and these lines are essential for dealing significant damage. The idea of learning your lines fits in the game's theatrical theme, and using these lines at the right moment is key to taking down your enemies, particularly in the game's many bosses. Now, this might sound intriguing, and it is, but here's the rub. Enotria's combat is extremely complex. You don't just have one or two weapons. You can have up to 3 loadouts, each one tasked to a mask that grants specific stat boosts. Each loadout can carry 2 switchable weapons, a gem that influences your parries, and up to 4 magical lines. And that's not all. There's an elemental system that plays as well, with the enemies and you being attuned to different elements like white, gratia, red fuoto, fuchsia, vis, and green malano. And understanding which element counters which is crucial, particularly in boss fights, where using the wrong weapon or line can make the enemies nearly impossible to defeat. And to make things more complicated, Enotria also features a skill tree, consumables, weapon upgrades, and over 100 different weapons and masks to choose from. There's a lot to manage here, and while I admire the game's ambitions to add layers of depth, it can feel overwhelming, especially when the game doesn't do a great job of explaining its systems. Souls-like are known for their steep learning curves, but Enotria takes things to a whole new level, with mechanics that feel needlessly complex. It's a case of depth turning into overcomplication, and for some players, this might just get in the way of the core experience. When everything does click though, Enotria's combat can be pretty rewarding. Bosses are challenging and visually distinct, and there's a wide variety of enemy types to keep things interesting. The magical lines and spells hit hard, and the parry timing is relatively forgiving, which makes it easier for newcomers to handle. However, not everything works as it should. Dodging almost feels useless. Unlike other Souls-like games where dodging is key to survival, in Enotria, it often just gets you into more trouble. Healing is also problematic, as the animations are slow, and if you're hit during it, your healing gets cancelled, which can be incredibly frustrating, especially during tough fights. And this game also includes a mechanic that allows you to alter the environments in certain areas, which does sound cool but feels a bit undercooked. It's a fun idea that doesn't get much attention or development to feel essential. It's more like a gimmick than a core mechanic. Visually, Enotria is ambitious, with its bright and colorful world standing in stark contrast to the darker palettes we often see in this genre. The game's art direction, filled with rich colors and theatrical design, is undeniably appealing. But that said, the execution doesn't always hit the mark, as some of the textures lack polish, especially when it comes to the human characters. And there are moments where the game's visuals feel a little rough around the edges. On the audio side though, the music score is fantastic. It beautifully blends Italian themes with a more epic orchestral vibe that matches the grand scale of the game. The sound design is solid, although not groundbreaking. and while the NPCs are decently voiced, none of them really stand out in a way that's memorable. So what is my ultimate opinion? Well, Enotria the Last Song is a game that tries hard to break away from the mold of typical Souls-like games, and in many ways it does succeed. Its setting, narrative, and art direction are refreshingly unique, and the depth of its combat system shows a clear ambition to do something different. However, the ambition sometimes works against the game. The overly complicated mechanics, frustrating healing system, and the lack of proper onboarding can make Enotria feel like a chore at times, even for seasoned players. But that said, the game for me is a 7.4 out of 10. If you're a fan of the genre and you're looking for something that's both familiar and experimental, then Enotria the Last Song is definitely worth a try. But do prepare to do a lot of learning and adjusting, especially when it comes to mastering the game's intricate combat systems, as this game is a reminder that sometimes less is more and complexity doesn't always equal depth. For those willing to put in the effort, there's a lot to appreciate here. As always, thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you've played Enotria the Last Song, let me know what you thought of the game. Have a great day.